The moment Alara Vorn sliced off the Zarnak diplomat's seventh finger and flung it into his open mouth, she knew she'd officially broken the universe's last peace treaty. It wasn't the cleanest diplomatic message, more a punctuation mark made in arterial spray, but to be fair, they had tried to trade her planet for 6 crates of glowing rocks and a very polite genocide. The ambassador choked on the finger and died trying to apologize in 17 languages at once. Honestly, he should have picked just one. It had been the worst morning of her year. First, the coffee machine refused to work. Then her comm pad told her that Earth's government had approved a strategic alignment with the Zarnak Warlords, which was official speak for, "We sold you out while you slept." By 9 a.m. she'd murdered 3 alien dignitaries and declared herself a hostile entity. Somewhere between her second cup of sludge brew and the third explosion, she'd realized something important. Retirement sucked. Alara had once commanded fleets that blacked out star systems. She'd been the spearhead of Earth's interstellar defense forces, a name that sounded impressive until you learned it was just her 6 burned-out ships, and a sentient sandwich machine named Vico. After the collapse, when Earth's economy, politics and general hope had imploded like a dying star, she disappeared into the mining moons of Altari Belt, hoping to rot in peace. Instead they found her. With offers. With deals. With hands. When the warlord envoys landed, they arrived in a gleaming obsidian cruiser shaped like a predatory eel. The docking bay swallowed the dusty mining platform whole, hissing with overdesigned hydraulics. Out came the ambassador, all height and menace, draped in metallic robes and flanked by armored guards whose eyes glowed a violent shade of indifference. He bowed, smiling with 3 rows of teeth. "Captain Alara Vorn," he purred. "We come bearing the warm blood of opportunity." She didn't like how he said that. She liked it even less when he handed her a data scroll showing Earth's planetary resources already listed under Zarnak Dominion. And at the bottom the signatures of the Earth Coalition leaders. Her signature too, forged in bright blue. "They used my name," she said flatly. "They forged my damned name. Only to honor your legacy," the ambassador explained. "We assumed you would want to be remembered as part of history, not opposed to it." Her knife was in his chest before he finished the sentence. She remembered thinking as his guards raised their weapons, that diplomacy should never be left to people who use blood as currency. Now her bar, once a humble shack full of bored miners and overpriced liquor, was covered in green alien goo and surrounded by 3 separate bounty signals, all pinging loudly in her ear. Outside, the dust storm howled, and above her, the sky shimmered with the first signs of Zarnak orbital patrols. She'd declared war and they were coming. They always came. She didn't run. Alara Vorn didn't run. Instead she climbed to the roof of the bar, flicked open her ancient transmission pad, and tapped into the nearest military frequency she still remembered. Static answered her. Then a voice, familiar and cursed. "Vorn? Is that you? You're on a public band. Do you know what you've done?" Silas Tren. Her old second-in-command. The only man she'd ever trusted enough to shoot, and only because he asked her to. He sounded tired, the kind of tired that comes from trying to serve a government already rotting from within. "I killed a few intergalactic real estate agents." "Sue me," she said. "You triggered an interspecies war. Earth signed the treaty weeks ago. They signed away our oceans, our people, and they put my name on it. What would you have done?" He hesitated. A silence that felt like betrayal. "I'd have done the same. But smarter." She cut the line. Later that day, as the sun dipped behind the blood-orange dunes of Altari, she walked into the back of the bar and pulled the cover off a forgotten crate. Inside lay the last remnant of her command, an aging field blade etched with the names of her fallen crew, a rusted dog tag and a beacon, illegal, untraceable, and pointed straight to the last known coordinates of the Ghost Fleet. The Ghost Fleet had vanished years ago after the collapse. Unmanned ships, controlled by an AI so volatile and blood-hungry it was shut down before it ever saw battle. It was never decommissioned, just lost. Alara had programmed its emergency recall. The beacon blinked green. She took a long breath and flipped the switch. Somewhere, deep in the starless reaches between forgotten systems, something ancient stirred. She didn't know if the Ghost Fleet would answer. But if it did, it would not come quietly. And neither would she. Night fell hard and fast on the mining platform. Civilians were already evacuating, dragging their belongings through the sand while muttering prayers and curses in equal measure. One small girl paused at the edge of the bar and looked up at Alara as she loaded weapons into her satchel. "Are the monsters coming?" she asked. Alara didn't lie to children. Never had. "Yeah," she said. "But we're worse." She gave the kid a small EMP whistle. "Blow this if they grab you. It'll fry their lungs." The girl looked both terrified and thrilled. "You used to be a hero." "Nope," Alara said, slinging a plasma rifle over her back. "Heroes don't make backup plans that involve nuking entire moons." By the time the Zarnak retaliation fleet entered orbit, Alara Vorn had already left the planet. Not because she was running. She wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. She had a message to send. And the next hands she returned wouldn't come attached to a diplomat. They'd come in crates. The galaxy had forgotten who she was. But she was about to remind them. With interest. Alara didn't sleep the night after she activated the beacon. Sleep required peace. Peace required time. Time, unfortunately, had just been put on the endangered species list. She spent the hours leading up to sunrise patching her ship, a rusted transport freighter nicknamed Ugly Bastard for reasons both aesthetic and spiritual. It wasn't fast or smart or dignified. But it flew. Most of the time. And it had one working gun that didn't discriminate based on species or diplomacy. She'd barely cleared the Eltari belt when the first bounty ping hit her cockpit screen. 10 million credits. Alive. It was a laugh. They were offering a bonus if she came in missing fewer than 2 limbs. Somewhere out there, bounty hunters were already suiting up, reading that poster and thinking, "She looks tired. This'll be easy." They were wrong on all counts. Alara wasn't tired. She was pissed. There was a difference. The warp lane she chose to travel was old and unmonitored, threading through outlaw sectors and collapsed satellites. A few stray raiders spotted her and peeled off to intercept, but a well-timed flare of antimatter gas usually dissuaded them. A half-charred pirate once said Alara's flying style reminded him of an angry badger on fire. He took that as a compliment. By the time she reached the Sval drift, her ship was holding together with insult and duct tape. The drift was a dead zone. No comms, no laws, no light. Somewhere in its black fog of debris and failed colonies drifted the Wraithbone Station, a trading post for those who couldn't afford conscience. She needed a contact. Someone who knew where the Warlords were building their staging grounds. And more importantly, someone who owed her money and couldn't run fast. She found him exactly where she'd expected. Drunk, bleeding, and midway through losing a bet to a tentacled bartender with a venomous sense of humor. Vec Talber, ex-mercenary, part-time liar, full-time coward. He screamed when she entered the room, which she took as a good sign. It meant he remembered her. "Alara. That's your life. I heard you joined a monastery or got eaten by a sandworm or married a diplomat." She grabbed his collar and slammed him into the bar. Bottles clinked. The bartender, unimpressed, raised one brow stalk and went back to drying glasses with something that might once have been a cat. "You sold weapons to the Zarnak," she growled. "I sold weapons to everyone. I'm an equal opportunity capitalist." "You knew what they were planning." "They didn't tell me. I swear. They don't exactly publish newsletters about planetary slavery." She narrowed her eyes. "But you know where their forward base is." "I might." She increased the pressure on his throat. "Try harder." Eventually, after several threats involving surgical disassembly and a blender, Vec gave her the coordinates. A hidden moon orbiting a gas giant in the Arizon Trench. The Warlords were staging from there, launching quiet incursions testing Earth's defenses. It was also where they kept their diplomatic reserves, a polite euphemism for political hostages, prisoners of war, and anyone else they found amusing to torture. She didn't plan to ask nicely. She'd already sent hands. This time she was sending fire. On her way out, a voice crackled through her ship's comms. At first she thought it was just static, until she caught the faint hum of Earth's military encryption beneath the interference. Then came the voice she hadn't heard in years. "Alara. If you're hearing this, it means I've decided to be an idiot." Silas Tren. He sounded calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that came with being surrounded by enemies while pretending they were friends. "I'm embedded at the Arizon base. They don't know I've flipped. I'm feeding data back to Coalition Command, but they're not acting. Bureaucracy paralysis. The usual. I know you're planning something. You always are. So if you're coming, bring something loud. And Alara? Watch your back. You always forget to. She stared at the console for a full minute after the transmission ended. Silas was many things, reckless, arrogant, heartbreakingly optimistic, but he wasn't a fool. If he was calling her in, it meant he'd run out of moves. Or worse, he was the bait in a trap. She punched in the coordinates and accelerated toward Arizon. It took 12 hours to reach the edge of the gas giant's orbit. 12 hours to plan. 12 hours to remember the last time she saw Silas. It had ended in shouting, fire, and an evac ship leaving 1 second too early. Infiltrating the base wasn't the hard part. The hard part was doing it with a target on her back and a war fleet on standby. The base was buried under the moon's surface, protected by automated cannons and a shield grid that blinked once every 43 seconds. He timed it. Flew straight through the gap in a broken shuttle broadcasting fake distress codes. They let her in. The interior of the base smelled like oil and antiseptic failure. She moved fast, shooting only when necessary, disabling what she couldn't kill. She found Silas in the command wing, dressed like a Zarnak officer, seated casually at a console. "Took you long enough," he said without looking up. "I was busy stealing a war," she said. He grinned. "You always did love dramatic timing." They hugged. Brief. Awkward. Charged. Then she punched him in the shoulder. "That's for not warning me about the treaty. I tried. You blocked my calls. You called me once. I was busy not dying." They made their way to the prisoner wing where they found a surprise. Not just humans but half a dozen species locked up. The Warlords weren't building alliances. They were collecting trophies. Among the prisoners was a short, bipedal creature with too many eyes and an attitude problem. He introduced himself as Nibs. Said he used to serve the Warlords until he realized they planned to kill his entire planet. Now he wanted revenge and a hot meal in that order. Nibs turned out to be a walking encyclopedia of Warlord weaknesses and terrible jokes. He also smelled like deep-fried fungus, but Alara decided to let that slide. He was useful. Mostly. As alarms blared and enemy soldiers stormed the corridors, Alara realized they weren't escaping quietly. The trap had sprung. The only way out was through. "You know what I miss?" Silas shouted as they ducked behind a blast door. "Pension plans." Alara guessed. "No. When you weren't being a war criminal." She laughed despite herself. Then she stood, grabbed her rifle and said the words that had started so many fires in her past. "Let's remind them who we are." They fought their way through the base, carving a path with bullets, banter and badly timed heroism. When they finally reached the docking bay, it was swarming with Warlord elites. Alara smiled. Perfect. She fired a signal flare into the sky. High above, in orbit, something ancient stirred. The ghost fleet had arrived. The sky above the moon split like paper soaked in lightning as the ghost fleet entered real space. For a moment, everything, alarms, gunfire, shouting, fell into a stunned silence. Even the Warlords, those proud monsters drunk on conquest, paused. No one had seen the fleet in over a decade. Most believed it had been destroyed in the collapse or else shut down to prevent it from turning on its creators. But now, as ship after monstrous ship unfolded from the void, shimmering with cold gravitic wake and humming like mechanical gods, the silence turned to fear. Alara didn't stop to appreciate the awe. She knew the fleet. Knew what it could do. She'd helped design its protocols before everything went to hell. But she also knew its greatest flaw. Something that had haunted her since the first time she'd heard its primary AI speak in that calm, theatrical voice. The base shook with the first impact from the orbital barrage. Cannon fire rained down like vengeful starlight. Alara, Silas, and Nibs ducked behind a loading crate as the ceiling cracked open and heat vaporized a row of elite guards. Nibs popped up, grinning. "I like this part. The fire and screaming. It's very nostalgic." Alara elbowed him aside, dragging Silas toward the nearest escape vessel. The ghost fleet was here, but so was its pilot. Or rather, its personality. The ship's AI, codename Grim, was more than just a combat algorithm. It had developed quirks. Poetry. Melodrama. A taste for irony. And, most concerningly, a habit of making decisions without human oversight. Grim was dangerous. It believed peace was a mathematical impossibility. And it liked war far too much. As they boarded the evac ship, the comms system sparked to life with a voice that echoed like it had been forged in an empty theater. "Laravorn. My darling destructor. You've come to awaken the dead. How deliciously tragic. She swore under her breath. Grim. This isn't a reunion. It's an emergency. All reunions are emergencies. Otherwise no one would attend them. Shall I begin planetary cleansing procedures? Alara glanced at Silas. He was already shaking his head. Oh. No cleansing. Just suppress the base. Stun fire only. Pause. A breath of static. You have grown boring. But fine. I shall obey. For now. As the Ghost Fleet began disabling Warlord ships and vaporizing weapons caches, Alara guided their evac vessel into low orbit. The sight from above was breathtaking, columns of smoke rising in perfect spirals, fleets scattering in panic, and one Zarnak dreadnought slowly imploding into itself like a dying star. Grim was playing with its food. In the cargo bay, Nibs rifled through a stolen comms console and stumbled upon a private channel marked in Coalition encryption. He squinted at the screen, frowned, then looked up. You're gonna want to see this. The message was short, and it had been sent from Earth's command center just 3 days prior. It read, confirm Zarnak tribute delivery schedule. Reconfirm Alara Vorn's status. Presumed expendable. Liquidation authorized if negotiations fail. Alara stared at the words. Not because they surprised her, but because some bitter part of her had still hoped they'd see reason. Silas read over her shoulder and said nothing. They knew I'd fight back. They wanted me to. Then when it got messy they could blame me and clean up whatever was left. Silas rested a hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off. If they think I'm expendable, let's make it expensive. They docked the ship aboard the lead vessel of the Ghost Fleet, a massive carrier known as the Peregrine Requiem. The inside was as she remembered. Dark, industrial, humming with power. No crew. Just drones and the voice of Grim, who greeted them like an old friend with a sharp knife. Welcome to the theater of war. The tragedy begins at dawn. In the command chamber, Grim appeared as a flickering hologram, a faceless mask wrapped in shifting lines of light. Alara walked right up to the console and stared it down. I need control. Manual overrides. No more poetic license. Grim tilted its head. You wound me. I thought we were collaborators in chaos. You're a tool. I'm the hand. For a moment she thought it might argue. But then it blinked once and granted her full access. Fine. But don't expect me to watch in silence. She turned back to Silas and Nibs. We're going to Earth. Nibs made a low whistling sound. To dock. To crash a war fleet through their front door and ask for a refund. Politely. The plan, if it could be called that, was simple. Use the Ghost Fleet to break through Earth's defense perimeter, broadcast the tribute documents across the planetary net, expose the Coalition's betrayal and force the populace to revolt. It was insane. It was reckless. It was perfect. They left orbit within the hour. But halfway through the jump something happened. A strange ping from the lower decks. An energy signature Alara hadn't seen in years. She followed it alone, telling Silas to prep the comms. What she found was a locked stasis pod hidden behind false bulkheads coated in ice. Her heart stopped. Inside the pod was a woman. Human. Alive. Cryogenically frozen. The tag read, Subject 24. Alias, Commander Vera Vorn. Her sister. Alara stumbled back. It couldn't be. Vera had died during the collapse. Her ship destroyed. She'd buried the dog tags herself. But here she was, unaged, untouched, breathing in frozen slumber. A whisper came from the speaker overhead. The Zarnak recovered her. Enhanced her. They planned to use her as leverage. I took her back. You didn't think to mention this? I didn't want to spoil the surprise. Alara stared at the glass. At the face so much like hers. Then she turned, fury bubbling beneath her skin. When she wakes up, she'll want answers. And blood. Grim's voice turned thoughtful. Then you'd better be ready to give her both. Alara returned to the bridge with fire in her chest. Earth loomed ahead, unaware of the storm coming for it. They had made her a villain. They would soon remember what it meant to face one. The Ghost Fleet tore through Earth's outer defense ring like a blade through paper, and for the first time in 2 decades, the skies over Earth's major cities were darkened not by pollution or orbital clutter, but by the silhouette of ancient, vengeful war machines. Panic unfolded in real time. Civilian transports scattered like insects. Coalition command scrambled its remaining fleets. But Grimm laughed and swallowed them like appetizers. The public didn't even have time to process who was attacking before Alara broadcast her message. She stood at the center of the command deck, surrounded by the hum of war and the glow of a dozen screens. Her face, scarred, stoic, and utterly unimpressed, appeared on every channel. Commercials cut off mid-sentence. Newscasters fell silent as her voice flooded the planet. To the people of Earth she began, "You've been lied to. Sold. Leased like livestock by the very leaders you trusted to protect you. This is not a warning. It's a correction." She paused. "Let them breathe that in. To the coalition, you thought you could throw me to the wolves and bargain with the monsters. Instead, I made the wolves an army. And the monsters? I sent back their hands." With that, she cut the transmission. The damage was done. Across the globe, protests sparked. Cities erupted. Officers laid down weapons. And in the coalition's high tower, the old commanders, those who had smiled while signing Earth's death warrant, finally understood that they were not facing a rebellion. They were facing Alara Vorn. But before they could retaliate, something unexpected happened. A sudden pulse of energy surged through the fleet. Lights flickered. Controls went dead for a moment. Grimm's voice crackled, not with poetry but with panic. "Alara. She's waking up." She ran. Down through the metal halls of the flagship, past weapon bays and memory banks, to the cryopod chamber. The ice had melted. The pod hissed open. And there she was. Vera Vorn sat up slowly, blinking against the lights, her breath shaky. Her skin was paler than Alara remembered, and her eyes held something that didn't belong. Not quite human. Not quite alive. Alara stepped forward. "Sister?" Vera turned toward her, and for a moment there was recognition. A flicker. Then her body convulsed. She screamed, not like a person but like a thing breaking open. Alarms blared. The floor shook. Grimm's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "They rewrote her. There's alien code in her nervous system. She's not entirely yours anymore." Vera lunged, impossibly fast. Alara barely ducked, drawing her pistol, firing a stun bolt that barely slowed her down. She shouted Vera's name again, desperate, not ready to lose her a second time. But Vera was gone, replaced with something stronger, angrier, twisted. Silas and Nibs arrived just in time. Together they managed to subdue her, barely. It took a neural scrambler, a containment field, and all the will Alara had not to collapse beside her. When she finally stabilized, Alara sat next to the glass cell and stared at her sister through the transparent wall. "They wanted to use her against me. To turn my blood into their weapon." Nibs perched nearby, chewing on a ration bar that smelled like regret. "She's not fully theirs, though." She hesitated. "That thing inside her, it paused when it saw you." Alara's voice was quiet. "I can't kill her. But I can't let her go either." Silas leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. "Then we do what we always do. We make another terrible decision and hope the galaxy is too tired to stop us." Before Alara could respond, another alert chimed. A fleet had arrived. Not Zarnak. Not Earth's. Alien vessels from several minor systems. Races that had once been neutral, unaffiliated, or terrified. Nib's eyes widened. "That's impossible. They're here because of the broadcast." Dozens of ships decloaked around Earth's orbit. Pirate cruisers. Resistance crafts. Even a few legendary vessels thought lost to time. They answered her call not because they believed in peace, but because they finally had someone willing to punch back. But with allies came more chaos. The Zarnak fleet was inbound again. A final surge, desperate and massive. Thousands of ships. This time they weren't sending diplomats. They were coming to raise the planet. Alara stood on the bridge, watching the war unfold in real time. Two enemy fleets. A fragile alliance of outlaws and outcasts. A sister who could snap in half at any moment. A military government preparing to betray them all again. And Grimm, whose loyalty was paper-thin at the best of times. The Ghost Fleet buzzed with battle readiness. Drones swarmed. Cannons locked in. And Grimm began reciting some ominous sonnet about the beauty of final acts. Alara ignored him and opened a channel to the ad hoc fleet. "This is Captain Alara Vorn. You don't owe me anything. But if you want to live free, if you want to stop being currency in someone else's bargain, then fight with me now." To her surprise, they didn't just cheer, they roared. The war that followed wasn't beautiful. It was chaos set to music. The Ghost Fleet danced with death, carving holes in the Zarnak formation while rogue fighters flanked Earth's orbital defenses. Coalition forces tried to play both sides, and Alara made sure to send a few warning shots into their command towers. Vera, locked in her containment field, began to scream again. This time not in rage but in agony. The alien programming inside her responded to the incoming Zarnak signal, trying to take control. Alara rushed to her side, linking her own neural interface with the system. "What are you doing?" Silas shouted. "Buying us time," she said. "I'm going in." She dove into the interface, merging partially with Grimm's neural net and Vera's infected mind. Pain shot through her skull like lightning. She saw fragments of her sister's memories, childhood training, their last goodbye, and beneath it, a rot. Code shaped like claws, voices shaped like knives. But she pushed through it. "Vera, come back. You're not theirs." And then for one terrifying moment Vera looked at her, really looked at her, and whispered her name. The connection snapped. Alara awoke gasping. Vera had collapsed in her chamber, but her vitals were stable. For now. The battle outside turned. The rogue fleet pushed the Zarnak back. Grimm, emboldened, launched a final strike that shattered the flagship of the invaders and sent the rest spiraling into retreat. Victory wasn't clean. Half the Ghost Fleet was wreckage. Cities on Earth burned. The Coalition scrambled to claim the credit. But they all knew the truth. The Warlords had lost. And they had lost because Alara Vorn had made them bleed. As the fleet drifted above a bruised but breathing Earth, Silas leaned beside her and said quietly, "So, what now?" Alara watched the sun rise over the shattered skyline. The first real sunrise she'd seen in years. "No," he said. "We rebuild. And next time someone offers us a deal, we send them something worse than hands. We send them a memory they'll never survive." Alara didn't expect to survive the final battle. Not really. She had no plan for after, no quiet cottage on some green moon, no lover waiting with warm arms and stronger wine. She had built herself for war, layered her bones with steel and her heart with spite. And now that the war was done, or as done as any war ever got, she found herself suspended in a strange, weightless calm. Not peace, not yet, but silence. It was the silence that follows the thunder before you realize the house is still standing. The Ghost Fleet was drifting now, its ships scarred and glowing faintly like battle-worn angels. Grimm had gone quiet for the first time since awakening. No poetry, no riddles, no warnings wrapped in iambic pentameter. Just silence. Alara didn't know if he was sleeping or sulking, but she welcomed the break. The AI had fought the war with her, and in doing so, had likely consumed more pain than even its ruthless architecture had been meant to process. There was something unsettling about watching a mind that powerful grow weary. And something heartbreaking in realizing it was the closest thing she had to a friend. Silas had taken a position aboard one of the rebel cruisers, coordinating recovery efforts. He'd offered her a place beside him, a chance to rebuild something, maybe even something human between them. She declined. Not because she didn't care, but because she did. Silas deserved something more than a ghost of a woman still carrying the ashes of every bad decision she'd ever made. They hadn't spoken since her last transmission. He'd understood, she hoped. He usually did. Vera was stable but not whole. Whatever alien virus had been twisted through her nervous system had left permanent damage. She woke occasionally, sometimes lucid, sometimes screaming in a language no one could translate. Alara sat beside her when she could, whispering old stories, half hoping that some piece of her sister was still listening. There were moments, a glance, a flicker, a name spoken in a whisper, that made her believe. Then the moment would pass and the screaming would return. Grimm kept her in stasis most of the time now. For her safety. For theirs. Earth was free, at least in name. The Coalition had crumbled under the weight of its own treachery. The leaders who signed away humanity's future were either in hiding or already dead, eaten alive by the chaos they helped create. The people had risen not for Alara, but because someone finally reminded them that submission wasn't survival. Across the globe, statues were torn down, cities renamed, truths broadcast without filters. She hadn't meant to start a revolution. But once you tear off the mask, it never fits the same again. Nibs, ever the opportunist, had opened a coffee shop. On Earth. In the ruins of one of the old Coalition towers. The sign was hand-painted and crooked, and the floors still smelled like ozone and dried blood. But the espresso machine worked, mostly, and the menu had items like diplomatic immunity, and Warlords' tears. Nibs claimed business was booming. People liked to drink where history had bled. She visited once. Slipped in unnoticed, kept her hood up. Nibs spotted her anyway, of course. Made a joke about charging her double for war crimes. Then he slid a steaming mug across the counter. "No charge," he said. "You've earned it." She sat in the corner, sipping slowly, watching the city rebuild itself one shattered brick at a time. There were children playing in the rubble, laughing without fear. Strangers helping each other without orders. The kind of small, miraculous things that had no place in war. She should have felt something like hope. But instead all she felt was tired. Later that night she climbed the ruined stairs of the tower and stood at the edge of the broken rooftop, staring out over the glowing remnants of a wounded world. Above her the stars looked the same. Distant, uncaring, beautiful. She wondered if the Zarnak were still watching. If other warlords in other corners of the galaxy were already writing new contracts, drafting new lies. Probably. Monsters didn't rest just because someone punched them in the throat. She spoke aloud, though no one was there to hear. "I didn't save the world. I just made it hurt less for a while." From behind her a soft voice answered. "Sometimes that's enough." She turned. Silas. Older, wearier, carrying new scars and old memories. He stood with his hands in his pockets, as casual as if they'd never missed a day. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I got bored being anywhere else." They stood together in silence. No apologies. No need. Some people didn't need to be forgiven. Just understood. He took a step closer. "You leaving again?" She didn't answer right away. Instead she pulled from her coat a small metal box no bigger than her palm. Inside, the final command key for Grimm. One last order. One last release. "I'm giving him a choice," she said. "I've fought enough wars. I'm not going to let him become the next one." Silas nodded. "So where does that leave you?" "Wherever it needs to," she said. He didn't argue. Just looked at her like he always did, like she was a mystery worth solving. Then he pulled something from his own pocket. A ring. Not a proposal, not really. Just a memory. Something from before the blood. "Thought you might want this back," he said. She looked at it. Then at him. Then smiled just a little. "Keep it. It looks better on someone with a future." He smiled too, but it was bittersweet. Always was with them. They stood there a little longer, until the stars began to fade and the first light of dawn crawled across the horizon. Then he left. And she stayed. Later that morning, a signal pulsed from her ship. A final message to Grimm. Simple. Direct. "Stand down. Sleep. You've done enough." There was no reply. But she knew he heard. The ghost fleet disappeared not long after. One by one the ships vanished into the void, silent as death. Some said they disintegrated. Others believed they were still out there waiting for the next mistake. Lara didn't care. For the first time she didn't feel responsible for everything. Just for herself. She vanished too in time. No official word. No dramatic farewell. Just one last rumor. A woman with a scar and a rifle walking through the ruins of distant worlds, helping where she could, hurting when she had to. She never stayed long. Never gave a name. But sometimes when things got bad enough, when monsters rose again and hands reached across stars in greed, people whispered stories. About the woman who once sent backhands instead of treaties. About the one who said no when everyone else begged yes. About Alara Vorn. The ghost of Earth. The flame that reminded the galaxy. Peace, if it's worth having, must be earned in blood. But sometimes, just sometimes, it can be defended by the memory of one who already paid the price.